This is Charlene from Earth Wisdom Yoga, bringing you the story of Ceridwen, one of the ancient Welsh Celtic goddesses. Ceridwen is the goddess of poetry, of wisdom, of knowledge. She's a shapeshifter. She can adapt to whatever situations she is in. She is often portrayed as having a cauldron, symbolic of the deep, deep well of life wisdom, of knowledge that she embodies and carries. In her archetypal story, we find Ceridwen with a son. He is reportedly unpleasing to look at, very dark in nature. Because he does not have his physical attributes to rely on, Ceridwen, in her compassion as a mother, wishes to impart to him vast amounts of knowledge so that he will be valued as a person and will have something to share. In her wisdom and knowledge, she mixes together herbs. There is reportedly a liquid, a concoction, that can be made out of herbs from the earth. And when it is brewed for a year and a day and distilled into 3 drops, when these 3 drops come into contact with the person, they are absorbed as wisdom, as life wisdom. But this does not come without conditions. The herbs must be found in far parts of the world. They must be brewed and stirred constantly. For if you stop stirring, the mixture will turn from knowledge into poison. And in fact, after a year and a day, when the concoction expunges these 3 drops, the remaining potion or elixir turns into a poison so potent that it cracks the pot. So in order to keep the pot stirring, Ceridwen engages the help of a young man. His name is Gwyn Bach. And in the story, he's also blind. And in some other parts of the story, Gwyn Bach is the lad who keeps fetching the wood that goes under the cauldron, and the blind man is a separate person that continues to stir. Such variances exist in stories that have been passed down for thousands and thousands of years. So, Ceridwen goes about her pilgrimage far and wide, collecting these herbs and bringing them back, placing them in the pot, while either one of these 2 males, one being young, one being old, continue to tend the cauldron. After a year and a day has passed, and the cauldron, the potion within it, is ready, Ceridwen in the story apparently falls asleep, for she's exhausted from her efforts that this endeavor has required of her over a year and a day. So at the very moment when the 3 drops are ready, Gwyn Bach, or the person who has been stirring and tending the pot, is closer in proximity to the cauldron than Ceridwen's son. And in other stories, he pushes him out of the way. At any rate, the 3 drops make contact with the lad who's been involved in the tending of the cauldron, and not to Ceridwen's son. Ceridwen wakes up and is reportedly enraged. She feels that this lad has deceived her and taken these drops for himself. Whether or not he has is irrelevant to the story, as he begins to run away in fear of her anger. Because he has taken these drops, he is able to shapeshift, and he escapes the cottage where they live as a hare. But Ceridwen has this wisdom herself, and she quickly changes herself into a greyhound. And just as she's about to devour him, he changes himself into a fish, dives into the water, at which point she changes herself into an otter and almost overtakes him. And then he escapes her grasp one more time as a bird. She shapeshifts into a hawk and chases him down and is just about to devour him once again, grabbing him with her sharp talons, when he shapeshifts himself into a single grain, a seed, and drops himself into a haystack. She shapes herself into a hen, and she plucks and pecks until she finds that seed and devours him. She shapeshifts back into her goddess form, and then 9 months later gives birth to him, and he becomes Taliesin, the renowned poet, bard, mystic, magician, wizard, wise man, who later becomes, as he's initiated into these arts, Merlin, the renowned wise man in the Celtic history mythology. Of note, the cauldron that Ceridwen stirs is the Celtic cauldron of knowledge, and the name for it is Awen or Anun. It's depicted with the symbol of a half sphere with 3 rays coming down from it. The 3 rays are also symbolic of Celtic ideas of wisdom. Each ray stands for sea, sky, and earth. The sea being the emotional body, the sky being the spirit or body of consciousness, and the earth being the physical wisdom we embody. These are the 3 wisdoms that make up Anun. The cauldron is that vast liquid, the abyss. We can see the surface, but we don't really know what's down underneath. The herbs represent the bounty of the earth. It is through the earth that the Celtic people found their spirituality. You cannot separate it from the earth. If we dive into this archetypal myth a little deeper, we can see that the ancients who animated wisdom and earth, spiritual qualities, to the feminine, were at some point being invaded by or coming into a cultural amalgamation with the Germanic peoples who had the solar or more masculine deities as their connection to spirit. So we see Ceridwen wishing to impart wisdom onto them and some deception by these masculine people. We have the shape-shifting in the story. First the hare and the hound, that's earth. Then we have the fish and the otter, that's water. We have the songbird and the hawk, that's the winged beings, the element of air. And then we have the hen eating the seed and literally transforming it. This is the element of fire. What she birthed was a male of wisdom, but he had to go through the elementals, the transformation that wisdom from all of the elemental bodies imparts to us. Only then did the blind man become wise and be able to see. The story doesn't really tell us what happened to Ceridwen's son. But I think it's significant that in the story, his beauty was not seen yet. It wasn't appreciated. And in the story, the wisdom of the feminine, of that great goddess, felt like it wanted to nurture maybe the ignorance or the unseeing of the young masculine. And so we can see that by a means of working together, the story may have ended up a little differently. It didn't. But we can learn something from this mythology that it carries. This is why we still work with the earth's wisdom. And we dive into what attributes of the earth, the water, the air, and the fire, their esoteric meaning can bring to us. It gives us a broader perspective of ourselves. I also find it interesting that once there's a moment when knowledge can be imparted, if we eat too much of anything, it can be toxic or poison for our bodies. I think there's a lesson to be learned there as well. I hope you've enjoyed this story. Blessings.